So, the functionality behind FRM Cust City, our second example that we'll sort of code more or less from scratch, is not too complex either. It uses the same connection, query, data adapter, and dataset scheme to create a list of different customer cities, first in the list box, and then, depending on the user city selection from that list box, displays certain customer info for that customer, for all the customers rather that reside in that city in the data grid view. When the user changes the city selection from that city to another city, another query is dynamically created and executed to display the customers for the newly selected city, etc., etc. Okay. So you're going to switch back to the project, and if you need to reopen it, please do so. We're going to close the cust H and switch to the cust city first to the design mode, right? So this again describes there's only two objects. They're going to be the list of distinct cities, right? All the different cities from the customer table in alphabetical order. When you click on one, the customers from that city are going to display in this data grid view certain columns, certain info about those customers. Okay, so switching to the back to the code, the first thing we're going to talk about is the connection string, since it will be needed in both the load event as well as this index, or rather list selection change events down here, which are the only two events we have. I decided to put it up as a class level variable, and it's already in there, so we don't have to do this again. It's this exact same string as we used in the cust H form in the previous video. Okay, so I want to note also that when we design the query strings both in a form load to get the distinct cities, and down here in the list change event, the selection change event, it's a good idea again to run them through the Microsoft Access first, and I'll show you the already completed queries, so we can sort of troubleshoot the syntax and double check the results at the end as well. Okay, so we're going to start with the load event over here, and we'll note that unlike the previous example where we had the data source configuration, the wizard automatically load the data into the data set from the adapter, we have to now do this sort of manually. So we're going to load data into customer data set data table from the adapter by typing me dot, and we'll pick the customer table adapter right here, okay, dot fill, open parenthesis, me dot, and then we'll find a sporting goods data set and the customer table. Or you could have just gone to the load event of the FRM cust stage and copy pasted this line, since it's exactly the same. Then we're going to create the str query. Okay, it's going to be a simple query, one line, where we're going to select distinct, spelled correctly, city from customer table. Okay, and we're going to order by city alphabetically. So that's a very simple query. If you need to go to the Access database and review these the cities, okay, what I did, I listed all customer city states. Make sure I don't have any cities that show up with the same name that show up in multiple states, which was not the case, and ended up with 53 of these guys. If you switch to the SQL view, you could remove the state piece and you'll get the exact same query I just created in the VB project, and get those 53 cities. So the 53 is the number we expect out of this query. Then we'll use the same, again, data adapter, data set, and so forth scheme to essentially execute this query, right? So we're going to call the adapter DAP city as OLDB dot data adapter with this query string and connection string from the top. Oh, I'm missing the word new, right? Okay, So then what we'll do, we'll fill the data set with the results of the query just like we did before. We're going to dim DST city as new data set, and then we're going to use the app city adapter and its fill method to fill it with the results from the distinct city query I just showed you. So DST city. So we expect a list of 53 cities essentially to reside in that default table 0 of that data set DST city. Now, unlike the previous example when we went row by row and loaded things into the and loaded records essentially into the list box, here we're going to simply directly bind the result of that query or the content of that data set to the LSD city, and through its data source property, okay, bound to DST city, but we have to use the table data type, right? So we have to use the table 0 because the data source is of the data table data type. And again, this is the only data table in this data set, so it's sort of confusing because we are equating the data sets and data tables in general. As I said in the previous video, any data set can have multiple tables, ours will not. And then we're going to also indicate that LST city dot data, what was it, display member. Okay, what do you want to display out of that data table? We have only one thing that we can, which is that city, the city field. If we had multiple fields in the query, then we can choose which one to display, or we can perhaps concatenate them to display multiple fields together and do any kind of weird thing. Okay, so I think at this point we can save. Make sure that the properties the startup form is the cust city now, and then we can run and see if the cities load into that form. Okay, I'm not going to count these. I am sort of assuming that the count of this is 53, and we'll figure out if it's not otherwise. Okay, so the next is the coding of the list box selection change event. Okay, here we use the new user selection, okay, in the list box, or the change of one city to another, right? So this event gets triggered when the user changes the selection from Boise to Concord and then back to Anchorage, right? So every time you change the selection, this event is fired. Okay, so what we want to do is format a dynamic or create a dynamic SQL query or query string based on the change in the selection to sort of retrieve certain information about all the customers in the newly selected city. Okay, so the query string is not terribly difficult. It is simply dim str query as string, okay, and it selects let's see what I got: last name, first name, comma, age, comma, gender, comma, and then I decided to select the phone number. I think it's just phone. But what turned out to be the case is that the phone number is not formatted properly. It just looks like what is it, a 10-digit number. So what I then spent considerable amount of time, more than I sort of wanted to, doing is reformatting it. So what I'm going to do here is I will first go through the entire process to show you the results, and then I'm going to pop in that phone format at the end, because it's just more kind of a pain than it's worth it. Okay, so I'm going to add that space at the end, and I'm going to then concatenate str query concatenate equal from customer where city. Okay, and this is the key piece where the city is equal single quote. Okay, after the double quote you append or concatenate lst city dot text, and then you concatenate in the double quotes at the end just that single quote, right? So make sure that you have all these single quotes, double quotes straight. So this is the single quote here that matches with this single quote over there. Okay, so the city like Anchorage is going to be enclosed in single quotes and become part of the query string, and then we're going to execute this query against the database and get all the customers from that particular city. Okay, so the rest is very similar to what we did now for the third or fourth time, I'm not sure. Dim data adapter called cost city as new OLEDB dot adapter, and then str query comma str connection. Where are you? Right here. Okay, and then we fill the data set with the result of this query as before. So dim dst cost city as new data set, and then dap cost city dot fill dst cost city. Now we're going to bind the data table from this data set, right, that table 0, the only one we always have, to the data grid view instead of the list box, right, just to be different because it's better for presenting multiple columns. But it has dgv cost city has the same data source property, kind of like the list box, that's then directly bound to dst cost city data set, and it's only table 0 here. Okay, there are a couple other things I wanted to do after running this and messing around with the widths. I decided that the dgv cost city dot columns number 2, so column number 2 is actually a third column, so that would be age comma width needs to be only 30, and then the next one, which is gender, needs to be 50. Okay, so, and that's neither here nor there. All right, so you'll see that when we run this, if it's successful, again, project, I think it's right, project start, that the phone number is not going to look all that great. As you can see, I don't think my gender 0, 1, 2, oh yeah, I forgot to change, obviously, I forgot to change 2 to 3. Okay, if I do that, I have reduced the width of the gender column, and then you'll now notice, after a change to Boston, get all the Boston customers, the phone number doesn't look particularly great. So what are we to do, so to speak? We can stop here. You could stop here. What I'll do, I'll go back to the query, okay, and we have to reformat the phone number. It's just text functions involving left, mid, and right, and it goes something like this. I'm going to delete the phone piece because I need to reformat it. I'm going to leave the blank, and I'm going to insert one more of these lines of code that go like this. We have, okay, and then this is a little tedious. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. I'm going to have in single quotes, I'm going to have the opening parenthesis for the area code, and I'm going to have the left function on the phone number and extract the 3 digits, that's the area code, space, and I'm going to have in single quotes the closing. Okay, so the opening single quotes, closing single quotes for the opening parenthesis, and opening closing single quotes for the closing, and then there's the 3-digit area code in between, and you can kind of see where this is going. Now we're going to continue with the mid, and from the middle of the phone number we're going to start with the 4th position, which is one after the end of the area code, comma, extract the next 3 digits, so that's the middle part of the phone number, and we're going to, in 2 single quotes, add a hyphen, and then we're going to have the right part of the phone number, the right 4 digits, ending it. Okay, and we're going to name this whole thing as telephone to be different, and I'm going to add, and make sure to add the space at the end, otherwise the telephone will be stapled to the from clause and the query is not going to work. So now I'm going to just save it, and if it has a mistake, it's because I screwed up this line here. It looks like legitimate phone numbers at this point. I'm going to close this. You can play around with this some more. Switch back to the presentation. Okay, and I'm going to pause here.